let me start by saying there are grounds for celebration here. One of the objectives of this series of seminars is to highlight all the good things which are happening across the industry, in different communities, in networks of journalists, in networks in different parts of the businesses, and to make these known. A few of the National Union of Journalists has long fought to raise the opportunities for black journalists, and since the 1980s the George Weiner Fund has been providing, the AUJ's George Weiner Fund has been providing bursaries and networks of support to help people into training and then onwards in their career. Recently, the Society of Editors, the Newspaper Diversity Fund, the Guardian, the Financial Times have all been extending these opportunities. The BBC has mentoring programmes, partnerships with higher education, with colleges, with schools, the News School, the Media Foundation placements. All these are designed better to connect with and become more representative of wider society. Without these examples of good practice, we couldn't really set out to disseminate them and learn from them, and each learn from what other parts of the industry are doing and other communities are doing. So we also have here today people from areas of beyond the news industry, and we've got much to learn from their experience within the industry, and perhaps they would be able to sort of take the lessons we're going to find out about the news industry and apply them in their areas too. Connie and Peter? Yes.
Trains were grounded away. Apologise.
Trains were a disaster. But there's still much to be achieved, and I'd like to tell a story which I think illustrates why this is so important. I was speaking some time ago with a young black journalist who started her career on the Birmingham Evening Mail. She started with the help of a bursary from its owners, Trinity Mirror. They'd introduced the bursaries to expand recruitment from black and Asian communities. And they had also taken strenuous efforts to make the Birmingham Post and Mail truly reflective of the society it served, in its workforce and in its reporting. This reporter was there when football manager Ron Atkinson made foul racist remarks about Chelsea player Marcel Desailly, for which he later resigned. That's Atkinson. The reporter went to look at the pages in preparation to see how the Evening Mail in Birmingham was covering the story, and she noticed a side story headlined Ron's Other Gaffes. And she pointed out to the editor and to the others that the word gaffes tended to downplay what had happened. And the example cited equated what he said with mere social clumsiness. And she told me imagine when she saw that, she'd imagined her father sitting and seeing that page and opening the paper and reading the page, and thought how furious he would have been at that treatment. It was changed before it went out onto the streets, but neither the editor nor the sub-editor had realised that it would be offensive. They hadn't seen that aspect of it until they had that conversation. Her experience then demonstrated a gulf in understanding. There was much that the vast majority of the people putting that newspaper together did not understand about the society on which they're reporting, for which they're reporting. They hadn't got that viewpoint that came back on it. But that reporter said she also often bit her tongue. If she drew attention every time she saw a problem like that, she'd soon gain a damaging reputation for complaining. So she felt she could only really speak out when she felt she really had to do so. And when she tried to tell people outside that the paper she worked for was making an honest effort to serve their communities, many criticised her for working for what they still regarded as a racist publication, or at best an irrelevant publication to their lives. And the Birmingham Post and Mail circulation fell sharply, and it has continued to fall. Editors seeing their own circulation stumble have told me that they have been deterred by Birmingham's experience from trying better to engage with minority communities. They see a risk there, the risk of losing their traditional white working class readerships and not replacing those readers with new ones. The pressures on this reporter to fit in with newsroom cultures and to try and change it, to defend her community, to defend her choice of career, to defend her professional integrity, to defend the paper she was working for, are reflected in the stories of many black journalists in the United States, which are explored by Pamela Newkirk of New York University, who will be speaking later in this series. It highlights why this seminar series needs to explore, and Deborah's referred to that, the cultures of newsmaking, and it raises issues about the wider cultural engagement that journalism educators need to address, and how those curricula are being designed and delivered. Newspaper and broadcast editors and managers living through enormously difficult commercial, cultural and technological changes might well feel that addressing this issue couldn't come later. But Steve Dyson, who took over as editor of the Birmingham Mail in 2005, that was long after that incident, and left only recently, sees things differently. Writing in this month's UK Press Gazette, sort of trade press for journalists, he states categorically, what a newspaper has to do is bridge that divide. And the divide he's talking about is that between the white and black and Asian communities of Birmingham, which is this patch. His suggested solution is for the paper to address and reflect common grounds of concern. To do that, of course, it needs a workforce capable of seeing where that common ground lies and having the kind of conversations which that journalist was beginning in the Mail, in the Birmingham Mail on that occasion. Broadcasters also see the need to bridge the divide. The strongest push for this comes with the public service sector, the BBC and Channel 4, which leads to a key question: who is paying for our news? Leaving other issues aside, if it's public money, all of the paying public are entitled to expect fair representation in the news stories, in the newsrooms, and in the boardrooms. We all pay for the BBC. Newspapers are funded by advertising and sales. But if we look at it, much of that advertising, that's all right, press for the tour there. Much of that advertising comes from the public sector, and much of the content of papers, local papers, originates in press releases from the public sector. Or put another way, and it has been a publicly financed subsidy for the content of the papers. ITV is withdrawing, independent television is withdrawing from delivering regional news, and the government wants news consortia to replace that service. It's putting out £21 million into 3 pilot projects, one in Wales, one in Scotland, and one here in the northeast, the Tyne Tees and the Borders region of England. All the main regional newspaper publishers, ITN, Independent Television News, the Press Association, which supplies news to television and to newspapers, other media organisations, and a number of universities are forming consortia to bid for these pilot projects and possibly establish a largely publicly funded model for multimedia, regional and local news. If news consortia are taking public money, should we not expect them then to reflect fairly in the news, the newsroom and the boardrooms, the societies on which and for which they report? So rather than suggest that because big changes are happening in the news industry, we should push extending diversity down the agenda, we suggest there's a strong case to make this is exactly the time to pushing it up the agenda in creating a news industry which truly reflects the country back to itself. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. That's my bit. And we're very fortunate to have Jim Miller to open this session, especially so because he's flying out, he's got a flight to Addis Ababa at 9 o'clock this evening. And he came up from Oxford last night and has to go back by Oxford. And the weather we've had today has been less than helpful in this respect. Jim was one of the founder members of the National Union of Journalists Black Members Council. He's a trustee of the George Viner Fund, as I mentioned earlier. Today he's president of the International Federation of Journalists and has been for many years. The International Federation is the world's largest organisation of journalists, and it represents some 600,000 in more than 100 countries. It defends press freedom and social justice, and it fights discrimination of all kinds around the world. Jim researches and writes extensively on current affairs, on the media, and on race issues, and he's able to put the matters that concern us today in both an historical perspective and an international context. So back to